Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving.
For
In
sure.
addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, Dr. Bernard James Mauser joins us to discuss definitions and reasoning in an adversarial culture. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie, baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow. And now we have a black screen. No, we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is the Coexist Boutique, for when you care enough to take your hands off your loved one's throats long enough to pick out the perfect gift. The Coexist Boutique. Our regular legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Dr. Bernard Mauser, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, directly referred to as the webcast, so we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Notice the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy this program, or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org. Click the yellow donate button and contribute as you feel led, and as you do, never fear. This webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now our very special guest, Dr. Bernard Mauser. I have my earphones unplugged.
We could hear it just fine, though.
Yeah, it was like blasting me out of my room here, even though I had the plugs in. So, greetings, Dr. Mauser.
Thanks for having me
My
today.
stepdad's name is Bernard, so this is going to go really well. It'll be like I'm going back home to Chicago. So.
Well, you know, he did mention that he has seen a couple of our programs, so he's not completely in the dark. And he decided he kind of likes what we do, at least to some degree, right?
I know. Yeah, he's going to give it a shot, you know. It's not for everybody. Some people run away screaming. We find them in the fetal position days later. But
well, I want to start off. I want to start off to bring to the viewers' attention a book that he authored. I just have, yeah, here's how I do this. I have to remember how to do this. That's my problem sometimes is I have a good memory, but it's just really short.
I just keep forgetting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Limited Government and the Founding Fathers. Why is this important? Why was it important for you to write, and why should readers consider getting it? Other than you're going to make some money if they do, but.
Yeah, other than the profit motive, right, of the greedy capitalist.
The truly shocking thing is that those white males wanted to limit their power in government. That's like I really don't think that's true. I think there's something shady about that. Are you going to explain this? Okay, go ahead.
I think anybody who's reading the book, I try to summarize the main argument the founding fathers were putting forth to adopt the Constitution. I put in the Declaration of Independence there. Some of the primary texts that the founders used to justify breaking away from Great Britain. So when they're actually reading the sermons that the founding fathers were reading, when they're understanding the arguments that were written in the local newspapers with the Federalist and the anti-Federalist papers that the farmers were reading, and when they start understanding, okay, these are the principles of liberty that the founding fathers believed in, they'll see how far we've strayed, and they'll also see some of the early correctives that the founding fathers used when the early government did start overstepping and adopting additional powers beyond what was listed in the Constitution.
You like the Sedition Acts, for instance?
Yeah, the Alien and Sedition Acts, prohibiting Yeah, free speech.
Wait a minute. Wait, didn't we say something about, freedom of the press and free speech? So maybe we should get those reporters out of jail, those journalists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, see, that's important. If you can understand, and this kind of comes into the area of definitions again. If you can understand what they were saying when they penned these documents, it makes discussion and debate easier, at least on our end, and perhaps for the hearers, not necessarily for those who have no definition, but an emotional argument to make. Pretty much. Now, I have to confess, I learned about the importance of definitions by dealing with false teachers and cults. Because you'll meet with someone like I would go teach in a church on Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, and Mormons. And then invariably I would get a call from somebody several weeks later that had heard me and said, well, you said Mormons don't really believe in Jesus. And I said, well, no, I didn't say that. I said they believe in a false Jesus. Well, no, they believe in the same Jesus. They believe that he came and he lived and he died and he was resurrected. I go, okay, but did they happen to tell you, because this is where definitions are important, that he was also born on another planet far, far away to a Mormon father and one of his many, many Mormon wives near a starbase collab, wherever that exactly is, we're unsure. And then he came to Earth as a spirit being to get a physical body.
You don't leave out his brother.
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And he's got a brother who is actually Lucifer. Did they happen to tell you that? Well, no. I said, well, so the name is okay. It is the definition of the person that is a problem.
And I always get Kolob confused with the Klingon homeworld. So it's my mind just, okay, sorry.
Just short circuits every once in a while.
Yeah.
So we live in an age now, as you're aware, that definitions seem to escape individuals. Let's say just individuals. I don't want to start. I'll start name calling later.
And groups, but individuals are made.
Yes, yeah. Well, individuals and groups in particular.
Yeah.
That come up with things like, well, you're just a fascist, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know much about Charlie Kirk until this terrible incident occurred. But one of the videos I watched as I was trying to figure out what he was doing, an individual called him a fascist, and he asked this really pregnant question. Can you point out one way that I have done something that is fascist? And the guy was silent.
You see, the definition of a fascist is anyone who is winning an argument with a liberal.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So, just as a kind of a starting point here, maybe you could tell us, what is a fascist?
Yeah, the fascist is someone who believes in collectivism. So during the French Revolution, the fascia was the symbol adopted by the French revolutionaries, and so the Italian fascist Benito Mussolini adopted that as the symbol that they would have. In medical terminology, when you hear things like the fascia, myofascial release, things like this, procedures where they release the connective tissue that surrounds all your muscle bundles and it holds them together. That's what you're thinking of, the collective of muscle tissues. When you're promoting collectivism versus individualism or statism, which is very totalitarian, this is a fascist ideology.
So the fascia symbol you were talking about is like those sticks that are bound together.
It's a bundle of sticks, and there's an axe head attached to the bundle of sticks.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I didn't know that it was the binding that symbolizes the collective that gives this symbol its meaning.
Yeah, it gives it its strength. That's correct. It's the collectivism.
Yeah.
So that's really important because, and at least from my perspective, and I believe it's true with you both as well, that isn't what we believe in. and nor are we trying to foist it on anybody. I do believe in individual thought, in reason, and even debating and argumentation, logic. I think those are all very important for us to be able to make decisions. Now, I mentioned earlier about what I call lurkers. Years ago, this is kind of funny to me as I think about it now. We were like early adapters of America Online around 1992, I believe. We're so early, we didn't have any
Wow.
numbers after our screen names. And my screen name was and continues to be Cults Are Us.
Oh,
it
yeah, I
was,
remember that. Those were the days.
those are the days. And it was just a for fun name I kind of tossed out there.
Right.
And what we discovered after a little while of going back and forth, Joy would post, my wife, she would post usually stuff dealing with the history of the Watchtower, and I would post stuff based on the Bible. And they didn't know we were married, so it made it easy because she was nicer than I am. But we discovered there's this group out there we call lurkers. They don't engage in the discussion. They look at both sides. They think about what's being said. They don't have it's they may be Jehovah's Witnesses, but they don't have to think about defending an issue particularly. They listen to both sides and they go, I think they're right. And we discovered that when an elder emailed her separately and said, my name is Doc Bob, that's the screen name.
Oh,
And
Dr. Bob.
Doc Bob, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they started dialoguing back and forth on Watchtower stuff. And he had been an elder 15 years. Then he connected with somebody else that was in our group that she specialized in the early church fathers. And so they started talking back and forth. So it went from lurking and watching to engaging with us on the issues. It was really kind of a cool thing. And ever since then, we try to, even when we are talking with someone with whom we disagree, to do it as cordially as possible, even if I want to knock their lights out, because there's lurkers watching.
The lurkers. We should
Right?
have a commercial for the lurkers, but
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I can't think of it.
And they tend to sometimes those with whom you are in disagreement tend to resort to name calling. I have a thing. We use this in our book about Bill Gothard. And I have to give credit really to Ron Hensel on this paragraph. He just did an outstanding job. In the 1930s, he writes, Roman Catholic priest and radio commentator Father Charles Coughlin discovered a very effective way of discrediting people he considered political threats. He would appeal to the anti-Semitism and isolationism shared by much of his audience by denouncing various individuals as atheistic Jews or imported radicals. It mattered little to Coughlin that the sources of his information were often untrustworthy. He knew that once he used the power of the broadcast media to slap labels on people, those people would find it very difficult to remove them from their reputations.
Witness Sleepy Joe and and Lying Ted and
Now, does that all speak to the issues that we have going on today?
Yeah, I think if you're a Christian, you're seen as being a fascist. So anything bad, it's come to be associated with anything bad, because they know the Nazis killed a lot of Jews and killed a lot of other people. Nazis are bad, so Nazis are fascists. So anything they dislike, anything related to traditional Christian morality, oh, you're a fascist. And if you try to defend that, all of a sudden you're also a fascist.
Right. Right, but they can't actually point to any way that you are a fascist.
No, it's the opposite. Yeah, and they do it by. I think you've pointed out the difference between the way we engage versus the way they engage. They have to be hyped up on emotionalism, whereas we try to rationally get people to actually engage in the arguments. Okay, so tell me your best arguments for your position. What's the evidence? what are your definitions for, like, what do you mean by fascism? How do I represent that? And so with a lot of my students, I have, thousands of students I've taught over the years. It is the case that very frequently they reach out to me like, I've never heard this before. It seems like the free market idea, this push for liberty, that's representative of what we call fascism in society, but that's the opposite of what I'm learning in this class. So it seems like fascism is a form of socialism. Yes, it is. The Nazi Party, National Socialism.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all that Mussolini was writing in the same publication that Lenin was the chief editor for, and Lenin liked a lot of Mussolini's work in the 1910s, and was generally approving everything that Mussolini was writing. So all these, if you read the fascist authors, they're all socialists. They just started emphasizing, okay, rather than international socialism that the communists and Lenin and Stalin were promoting, how can we do this in our own country? And especially moving from, it really inspired both Hitler and Mussolini to see their countrymen not dying for this idea of international socialism, but dying for their country. Oh, how can we harness that sentiment and that tribalism? Okay, National Socialism is going to be it.
So can I show you an image of where I think we are today, Don?
Sure.
This seems to be where we are. Or at least a large segment of the population, Everybody, not everybody. Okay, this would be the left. I just turned it off. Sorry. I'm guessing that you could find examples of that on the right. You're literally Mao, you're literally Lenin, Trotsky, whatever. But I think it happens a lot more on the left than it does on the right, personally.
Well, I think it can happen on both sides. In fact, our article this week is on the fine art of name calling. And we're kind of talk about that without naming any particular groups, because it does happen on both sides. And Bernard, you may not know this. We've written on elections a couple of times. And I might have picked this up from Norm Geisler, but I kind of describe our nation as really three parts. We have those who are hard left, about 20% of the voting population. And no matter what happens, they're going to vote left. And then you got about 20% that's hard right. And no matter what happens, they're going to vote right. And then you've got about 60% that are somewhere between those, and they shift back and forth. The difference is they're not really strong ideologues. They mostly, I call them middle America, they mostly want to be left alone. They want to do their job. They want to have a vacation each year. They want to save enough money to send little Johnny and little Jill off to college someday. They may or may not be friendly toward, let's say, the gay agenda, but if their neighbor's gay, okay, just keep your grass cut and we're fine. They just want to be left alone. What they do not like is radicalism. And so when election time comes, they shift away from radicalism. So whichever side seems more radical, they move away from them and vote the other way. Does that sound correct to you?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, most of America, we're built on, if there's anything America stands for, the Statue of Liberty really represents our symbol of liberty. And so we just want to be left alone. Leave me be. If you're crazy and you want to start trampling on, like, if you want to do something in your house, that's fine. But I think that's how most people feel. If you start coming on my property doing stuff, now we got a problem. And, and the side that is most promoting the agenda of infringing upon your personal life, those are the ones we react most strongly. Like, now you're messing with me. It's okay to do stuff over there, but stop messing with me. And most people don't want to reflect on deep things. So the idea of political debate and discussion, that's far from, growing up with an Irish mother. The two things you're not allowed to talk about are religion and politics, because that leads to fight. And here I am, a professor. Those are the only two things I talk about are religion and politics every day, day in, day out, and teaching others.
I grew up in an Irish family too, and yeah, I heard that same thing. I didn't know it was uniquely Irish, but I heard it.
Well, I don't even know if it's was uniquely Irish. I think there was a time in our history that it was impolite to talk about religion and politics in public discourse.
I
So
remember, I vividly remember how in get-togethers, my parents had lots of friends. They mingled and mixed and all that. Only one time do I remember there being a discussion about politics, and it quickly became acrimonious. It was somebody new to their circle of friends came in, somebody they had never met, and it got really weird. And I was like in the next room, and I was hearing these voices raised, and I thought, so this is why my parents said not to do that.
so
So
I have a couple that I want to maybe 3 or 4 that I kind of go through quickly, and then I want to come back to talk about part of it. You did Nazis, very good. I like that. What about racist? You're labeled racist. What does that mean? What does it actually mean? And then how is it being used?
yeah,
So racist is one of those labels today. So it's all of these are derived from critical theory. So Marx's critical theory says the basic position of all of us is man against man. There's conflict between everybody. And so rather than the foundational principle of the way you and I get along, it being cooperation, which is more of a freedom approach, like, hey, we're better off together because you specialize in one thing, I specialize in another, we trade, and you help me, I help you. So rather than mutual cooperation, voluntary exchange, and freedom, conflict is the thing that drives society. Drawing a little bit from Hobbes' view of the state of nature, man against man, red in tooth and claw, and Marx is borrowing this idea of conflict drives all mankind. So all the critical theories, all the critical studies in the different realms, including the critical race theory, everything boils down to race determines and reality, basically. And the real definition of racism that you and I grew up with, that until really recently, we had never heard of Abraham X. Kendi's anti-racist railings. We just thought it meant thinking somebody of a different skin color or a different nationality was inferior, intrinsically inferior, versus the biblical view that we're all created in God's image, we're all related, we're all family. Sure, there's different genes. Some of us are taller, stronger, faster, smarter. We recognize these natural differences, but ultimately we're all related. We're all creating in the image of God. Racism traditionally has just meant you think people are inferior, that some of us are better than others, really based on this Darwinistic view of this evolution, on origin of species, and in his subtitle in preservation of the favored races. It's like, wait, that was Darwin. So they really embrace this Darwinistic principle. Well, what the anti-racists say is, if you're part of the ruling class, which is, they call it white culture, then you're automatically intrinsically racist and you're determined not to know things. So there's like the sociology of knowledge that comes with it. There's a privileged information and knowledge that you have if you're of the oppressed group. And the oppressed are, on their theory, well, you have to be black, minority in some way, at least in America. Now, when you point out other minorities in America, like maybe the Chinese or the Japanese or something like that, oh, they don't count as minorities, but they're actually minorities, guys.
Right.
Oh, they don't have this structural racism. You have to set up this metaphysical structure of, and this so when I say metaphysical structure, the structure of reality that is contrary to the actually existing reality. You have to set up an epistemic structure, meaning how do we know things that is unique to the oppressed race in their narrative. Because if you do that, then white guys like me can't actually speak to that. But from the Christian worldview, which we say is true, and anything opposed to is false, and it's true because it corresponds to reality, we say it doesn't matter. Arguments don't have a race. They don't have agenda. They don't have a gender. we're not promoting a different agenda. If there's something wrong with my argument as a white male, then find the fallacy. What's the evidence against my view? Where have I erred in my reasoning? But reason is common across all mankind because we're all created in the image of God. So
Right.
your racial argumentation and structure of the anti-racist Abram Candy and this critical race theory doesn't actually work because it's actually contrary to the nature of reality. They have to try to like discard reality to allow their narrative to dominate.
Right, right. So they operate only on a narrative, not anything is objectively testable and true.
Right. And then they're going to discard any arguments you present as, oh, you're just racist. And I remember having a student in class always dismiss everything when I would present arguments for one view versus another, even quoting left-wing think tanks like, okay, if you want to make sure you're not poor, the 3 things you need to do is number 1, get a job. Number 2, don't have children before you're married, and graduate from high school. If you do those 3 things, the liberal think tank, the Brookings Institute, has found if you do those 3 things, you're very unlikely to be poor for very long, and that the group that is poor quickly fluctuates out of that. So the assumption is you're determined to be poor your whole life. No, that's actually a fluctuating group. There's periods of time where, okay, you lost your job, you might go into that group, and then the next year you're in the upper middle class. So a lot of that is assumed. Well, when I bring this up, I have had several students say, well, you're just racist. What's racist about what I said? Work and wealth are related. This is just a structural reality. And the way it's discarded is, oh, that's just the white culture. No, this is just reality. This is how you succeed in life. It has nothing to do with white culture.
It kind of implies what they're already thinking about Black people, doesn't it?
In some ways.
Right. I mean, they're saying, well, these people, well, to me, it kind of parallels the whole situation of the question, the question that, haunts liberals. Can Black people figure out how to get driver's licenses so that they can vote? I mean, do they have the wherewithal? Do they know where the DMV is? Do they know how to find it? Do they know what a driver's license is? I mean, they've literally put people on the street in Black neighborhoods, interviewing Black people, saying, do you know how to get a driver's license? And they go, well, yeah, who doesn't? Well it's like, do you know where the DMV is? Well, yeah, you go down 3 blocks, you turn right. It's about a mile down, on the right. They're literally saying this, and they go, well, why are you asking this? Because I've heard that if we require Black people to have driver's licenses, then that's going to prevent them from voting because they don't know how to get them, or they're just not, they just don't have access. And the people say, well, I've heard Black people say that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Right.
I mean, it's like, how idiotic. And yet it is liberal white orthodoxy. I mean, it has been presented as an argument before courts by lawyers. That's how ridiculous this generation is.
Well, yeah, and it causes angst, and it causes,
well, how do we get along in this kind of
how do
situation
you get along?
where we have all of these, differing points of view, right?
Right, that's right. And we have our sponsor has some.
Yeah, they have some questions. Do you struggle with finding the right wine to bring to your cousin's pagan goat sacrifices? Do you wonder what to wear to your neighbor's neo-Nazi parties? Do you get anxiety attacks when trying to find the right picket sign to share with your friends from Westboro Baptist Church? Well, now you can say you're canceled to the uncertainty of celebrating special occasions with loved ones on opposite sides of the culture wars, because you can find the perfect gift for any ideology at the Coexist Boutique. This week's special deal in honor of the 60th anniversary, well, it's actually it's way past the 60th now, isn't it, of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Relive the days when university students subjected their professors to public shaming sessions in which they would break their eyeglasses and publicly rebuke them at great length for not exhibiting politically correct opinions and behavior. Oh, wait, That's going on right now in the USA. This week's special deal, Cultural Revolution eyewear, genuine smashed Chinese prescription lenses and frames, formerly owned by PhDs and university administrators, dating back to 1966 to 1976, the years of the Cultural Revolution. Only 99 cents a pair at the Coexist Boutique, for when you care enough to take your hands off your loved one's throats long enough to pick out the perfect gift. So you got to run right over there. If you want to get along with your neighbors these days, you just got to learn how to coexist, you know?
Exactly.
Not everybody wants to, but
So, okay, now let's talk about two. Well, we had racist. How about xenophobic?
Xenophobic. Yeah. Quadrophenia was the WHO, right? Okay. Did they ever have a xenophenia? No. Xenophobic. Okay.
And you're on.
Sure. Yeah. So there is this idea on both the left and the right about fear of foreign imports, foreign invaders coming into our culture. And especially insofar as something that Reagan pointed out is really unique. I was watching some footage of Ronald Reagan earlier this week, and he was saying something that's really unique about Americans versus anywhere else in the world. We are this melting pot of all these different ethnicities. So there's very few people whose ancestors didn't emigrate here to make a better life for ourselves. So we accept, and we have accepted historically, the best from every different country, in part because they knew that we had the liberties that allowed them, that if they worked hard, they could succeed. So they came, your ancestors came here for a better life. They didn't come here for a better socialist welfare program.
Right.
And people are fleeing these socialist countries to come to America, not for the social welfare programs, but because they know that they can make a better life for themselves. So it's a land rich with opportunity. And one of the things that I think a lot of people on the left and the right have failed to understand from an economic point of view. So one of my courses, I teach philosophy, politics, and economics. And the Marxists misunderstand this, and the Marxists teaching our kids who are on the right, when we send them to school, also fail to understand this. When they're leaving, they're like, I'm still conservative, but they're really concerned about different people from different countries taking our jobs in different areas of the US. And what you tend to find is this. One, they assume that the economic pie is fixed.
Right.
And so it's called the fixed pie fallacy, that America's wealth isn't growing. Well, there's things that exist today that didn't exist when we were children. So nobody had a computer in any house in America when I was a kid.
Right.
And everybody's carrying one around now in their pockets, and not just in America, but all around the world.
Right.
So, even when my youngest daughter, I have 5 kids, my youngest daughter's born, from the time she's been born, there's new things that exist today that didn't. So in the last several years, new achievements, new accomplishments, new inventions, the economic pie is continuing to grow.
And so that was all because of socialism, right? Socialism did that. We didn't build that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, right.
That's the collective that did that, right?
That's part of the assumption with the exchanges, is that when you have these exchanges, it's the government that's doing this and not the market. So it's not your inventions, it's not your hard work. And so that it does irritate me, like when a politician says, oh, I'm going to make America great again. It was never the politicians that made America great. Right. It was because you stayed out of our way and allowed us to, you protected our private property, you protected our liberties, and allowed us to invent and flourish. Yeah. And you didn't protect special interest groups. When you do that, that harms the economic pie.
I'm reminded, Milton Friedman made a statement that you name it, every major innovation came as a result of individual initiative. Every single one. He couldn't think of a single exception. I can't. And as soon as I thought of that, I thought, I've seen this clips of this movie. It's a Russian movie made in the Russian language, about the inventor of the AK-47. It's just a guy, and he was in the army, And the Russian military already had a rifle that was picked out by the collective. The top general had put his imprimatur on it, said, "This is what we're going to do." They had already started making it. When they brought this AK-47, this Kalashnikov, to the general, it was just a demo version, whatever you call it. And he saw what it could do. The general immediately canceled. What are we going to do with all those ones we made? The general said, melt them down and make these instead.
Mm-hmm.
So here in the middle of the socialist utopia,
Mm-hmm.
it was still individual initiative. How did they get those rockets into space in Russia? The German scientists. They were. I mean, we had ours. We all grabbed what we could at the end of World War II. It's like, what has the collective ever produced except collectivism?
Yeah.
Except
it's the market that does that. That's right.
Yeah. So
okay.
It's freedom that does that. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
another one, sexist.
Sexism.
Yeah. I mean, that's another big one. Sexism.
Yeah.
Misogyny.
So misogynistic. Yeah. So some of the assumptions. So this is part of the idea that the sexual revolution is really implanted into the minds of a lot of young Americans, and especially young American women, that they're basically being oppressed, and they'll point out things like the gender wage gap as evidence for these things without actually looking at the real reasons. So I was explaining this to my wife a few weeks ago. I said, if you would just take a moment's reflection on, okay, what do you think might have happened in a woman's late 20s through late 30s that might have disrupted her job progress? Maybe she got pregnant, took some time off to raise her kids. So when you're comparing a woman who has 10 years work experience versus her husband who has 20 years and continued to work while she was at home rearing their children, you're going to see an economic difference between that just by virtue of that.
What happens when you filter out those women? What happens when you filter out those women and only include the women who stayed in the workforce, did not have kids, maybe didn't even get married? Then what happens?
Yes, at least from what I've seen, there's a very little difference. In some of the studies, it actually shows women make more than men.
Right. Thomas Sowell points that out.
That's the case. Yeah. So yeah, Tom Sowell, his book, Economic Facts and Fallacies.
Yeah.
He brings up this idea of sexism and the gender wage gap. But here's one of the things, and especially since the recent death of Charlie Kirk, he was talking about this. Now, his wife is a very successful woman, very intelligent. She's running businesses, raising their children. But the lie that a lot of these feminists sold during the sexual revolution is that women couldn't be fulfilled unless they had a job.
Right.
And it's like, that's a lie. A lot of women are very fulfilled in raising the children, having children, raising the children, taking care of homeschooling them and everything else. My wife's exhausted doing that with our 5 kids. And can't imagine adding a job on top of that. But I remember her anxiety in the days she used to work at a law firm. And she would have so much anxiety from working at the law firm. And she worked at a bank for a while in an insurance company. And all of those days were just filled with so much anxiety. And this, with homeschooling the 5 kids and basically, managing all our finances, she feels very fulfilled as a result of doing this. Like, this is meaningful work. Like, I'm spiritually developing the hearts and minds of the next generation, and passing our values to our children, training them in logical thinking and reason, and imparting Christian virtues and so forth.
There used to be a saying, I heard it a lot: the hand that rocks the cradle, can you finish it? Rules the world. I mean, my high school U.S. history teacher said he thought it was a crock to talk about, female oppression, because at that time, the late 70s, women spent between 55 and 60 cents out of every dollar that was spent in the United States. So who has the real power? The people who are making the money, or the people who are spending it? The people who get to choose what is bought, what is purchased. So
Now,
yeah.
before I go on to my next little thing that I'd like to talk to you about, because number one, I am really persuaded that what we are seeing is a spiritual battle, not a political one. It is just playing itself out in politics, in my opinion. Because in many ways, what we're seeing, I think, is a rebellion toward God, rebellion toward God's creation of humanity. We don't like it that he created us male and female. We want to be something else of the 112 whatever sexual types. We don't like how God created marriage. We don't like God on one side, and on the other side, we're going, wait a minute, we had ethics and morality that came really from Scripture, and we even have atheists like Tom Holland going, yeah, we wouldn't have Western culture if it wasn't for Christianity. That's pretty interesting and profound. I thought he did a great job in his book Dominion. We even have now I can't remember his name. The blind clockmaker. What's his name?
The blind
Richard Dawkins.
Dawkins, who in 2019 decided he likes Christianity after all. He's not a Christian, but we need Christianity. He even likes
Christians are coming to his rescue.
Yeah, exactly right. So before I ask the next question dealing with that, because I think it is spiritual, but I thought I would look at something that was written by a sort of known guy by the name of Thomas Jefferson. You know, some may have heard of him at some point in time. And he says
if you travel in those circles, you know.
Yeah, well, okay, and this is I found this kind of interesting. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. This is from the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. It was drafted in 1779 by Thomas Jefferson, ratified in 1782, and it says, well aware of the options and belief of men depend not on their own will, but follow involuntarily the evidence proposed in their minds, that Almighty God, Thomas Jefferson said that, Almighty God hath created the mind free and manifested his supreme will that free it shall remain by making it altogether unsusceptible of restraint, that all attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or burdens or by civil incapacitations tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness, and are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion, who being Lord both of body and mind, yet chose not to propagate it by coercions on either, as was in his almighty power to do, but to extend it by its influence on reason alone, that the impious presumption of legislators and rulers, civil as well as ecclesiastical, who, by being themselves but fallible and uninspired men, have assumed dominion over the faith of others, setting up their own opinions and modes of thinking as the only true and infallible, and as such endeavoring to impose it on others. Isn't that what we see happening today? This idea on one side that we don't need your morality, we don't need God, we don't need the Bible. We know better. Your worth is given to you by the government. We decide. Is that kind of where we're at today?
Yes, and I think even going back further, a few years prior to that, Jefferson was writing about these unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So a lot of people know about that in the Declaration of Independence. And so he's building this foundation on natural law and natural rights that governments are instituted among men to preserve those rights and protect them. They precede the government. So those rights exist, and governments are established in order to protect those rights. And the governments only exist in order to protect those rights. So they don't have the right So these individuals are superior to the government in those ways and their rights, because these come from God.
I remember when Clarence Thomas was nominated, it seemed like the most controversial thing about him, before we heard anything about Anita Hill or anything else, was that he believed in natural rights and natural law.
Yeah.
You know?
Joe Biden really grilled him on that. He couldn't believe he believed in it. Like so the legal positivism that is the primary legal philosophy taught in law schools today in America is that the state creates all your rights. They've rejected the natural law in Romans 2, saying, okay, there's no transcendent law by which we could judge a nation. Everything is just what the government gives you your rights. And they're the ones who are responsible for telling you what your rights are. And as long as so this is where the danger becomes, as long as you're speaking in line with supporting the state or the government, then we'll allow your speech to still exist, but you don't have a right to criticize the government. That would be something that's contrary, because the government's the thing that gives you your rights. So you could say anything as long as it's within the allowable opinion. It's like, what's allowable opinion? Oh, that's politically incorrect. You can't say that.
We are the law.
Christianity is politically incorrect, guys.
Yeah. We're living in a post-Christian world, and Francis Schaeffer was saying that back in the late 60s, early 70s. Of course, it had come to Europe earlier than it came here. But
Well, so this leads me to one that is being used a lot these days, that you're taking away our democracy. Okay. How do you even begin to respond to something like that?
I would just say, first I'd ask them a question, like we always should. What do you mean by democracy? And then I would say, after rule by the majority. Is that necessarily good? Because the majority said that the Jews should be killed in Germany, and would that make it? Or maybe what if the majority said that everybody with blue eyes should be enslaved? Would that make it right? Or the majority says everybody has to give all the minority, and that 49% have to give all their money to the majority. Would that make it right? So you give them examples that seem just obviously absurd. Okay, so then maybe. And then you could ask the question, is America actually a democracy? It's a constitutional republic. And the whole idea of the Constitution is this, that the Constitution itself is a law restraining all the people under it, including the guys who are the elected officials. So they themselves have to follow the Constitution, and the Constitution restrains them primarily. It tells them what they can do.
Yeah.
It's not on us what we can do. It's really about how can we restrain the guys who are, because they're not angels. They're just as sinful as us. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. How do we restrain those guys? That's what the Constitution is binding, as to the powers of the elected officials.
Right.
What you find in a pure democracy, I believe, is let's just say tomorrow the U.S. became a pure democracy. Now they've even talked about lowering the voting age to 16. I mean, in a pure democracy, 2-year-olds, anybody who could fill out a ballot would have the right to vote. In which case, what you ultimately would have is 330 million presidents of the United States. Because what ends up happening is the people who lose, as we see every election cycle, will do anything to overturn the results of the previous election. Or think that they can. And so, like right now, everybody's yelling about. In 2016, Hillary was yelling that after 2016, she said that was rigged. But when Trump comes out and says 2020 was rigged, now he's the enemy of the people, and now they were already saying within minutes of Trump's win in November that was rigged.
Right.
Maybe not in as big a numbers, but you hear it. It's always there. And what you have is, I mean, why are they, when ballots don't work, there's always enough people who resort to bullets. And that's what we're seeing happen.
Well, we've moved in that direction. I want to hang on for a moment on this republic, this idea of a constitutional republic. Because I find, unfortunately, and it's another one of these narratives. It's the narrative that's being used that contends we are a democracy, and the democracy is now in jeopardy. The problem is it never was a democracy. They as I have researched this, what I find is they use the best parts of democracy and the best parts of republic, and they combine them into what we have, a constitutional republic,
Mm-hmm.
which is neither pure. It's not purely either one.
Mm-hmm.
It's something else that they believed was uh, a better fried chicken, if you will. Uh, am I accurate in that? And how does that actually supposed to work in our national politic?
So with our form of government, with this constitutional republic, we elect our officials, and then they go and they're supposed to represent the will of the people who elected them. And so, which is kind of what they're supposed to, but they don't necessarily do. And that's what we always get disgruntled. And usually it's about other people's congressmen, never our own. Oh, our own congressmen are great. It's the other guys.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times the incentives, if you start looking at the perverse incentives for them, it's to do things that harm generally the country at large to benefit their own population. So if they can fleece other areas of the country for their money in taxes and bring jobs to your area with the money they've acquired from other people, it's like, okay, you're spending other people's money on other people. Like Milton Friedman talked about the least efficient way to spend money, the most immoral way, but it gives it like, oh, look, he's like Santa Claus giving you something for nothing. Look how generous he is. Yeah, with other people's money.
Right.
And so
Eventually you run out of it.
The greatest thing about this Constitution, though, is the thing it does is it brings the power under the rule of law, so that these representatives, what we should be able to do is say, call them out when they're violating, because the Constitution says these are your powers, that we can actually go in there and say, actually, those are not your powers. What you're currently doing is beyond what the Constitution allows you to do. And one of the things I have that you already brought up, this is what they did with the Alien and Sedition Acts early in the history of the country. After John Adams was elected president, the Congress pushed through these Alien and Sedition Acts to protect the Federalists, and that's John Adams and all his cronies who were in Congress, against the anti-Federalists and Thomas Jefferson, who was the vice president at that time. And they said basically any speech that was critical of the government was seditious libel. And so they closed down newspapers. They wanted to put people in prison. Well, the response by the state,
they did
where
imprison
they called them the Principles of 98. And Jefferson and Madison wrote the Principles of Nullification, that basically in the state of Virginia and in the state of Kentucky, the Virginia Resolution of 1798, the Kentucky Resolution of 1798, written by Jefferson and Madison, two of our founding fathers, early presidents, said that these unconstitutional overreaches by the federal government would be null and void, and they would not be recognized or enforced in our states. So everybody in their states, you're not going to face any federal prosecution or persecution as a result of the state having the power to protect its citizens and nullify unconstitutional laws. I mean, just the power we could get back from the federal government when states realize this is how they acted early in America.
Yeah.
Your state government could protect you. And even your sheriff could protect you, actually. So that's been done even since the Clinton administration, where constitutional sheriffs, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And when your sheriff sees an unconstitutional overreach, he can protect you from the president of the United States if need be.
Yeah, because leftists today, and I've often wondered why they don't. The ones especially with the sanctuary states, what they're doing is they're overriding federal law with local laws. And even with, marijuana laws, they're overriding federal laws. I often wonder why leftists don't cite those nullification acts today as precedent for what they're doing. What do you think about that?
It's probably, I
I'm
hate
glad
to
they don't.
say, attributing it too much to ignorance. But
Yeah,
a lot of
they don't.
people's, at least that you probably found this too, even when we're dealing with those who are cultists, their knowledge of history starts when they're born. Like, oh, I just remember this.
Exactly.
It's like, do you remember the false prophecies the Jehovah's Witnesses had 4 times of the
Yeah,
end
yeah.
of the world? Let me show you the documentation. I didn't even know.
Well,
How
Don
could
says
you not
most
know? I
people,
wasn't born yet.
for Don,
Okay.
most people's history begins 10 minutes ago, right? Is that what you used to say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Well,
kind of the
you know,
line I use for most people. History started about 20 minutes ago. So
the founding fathers didn't give, I'm going to say this politely, an airborne rodent's rear end about the majority and their opinion. The only directly elected political office at the federal level was the representative in the beginning. Senators represented the states,
right.
not the people who voted directly for them in the states, because people didn't vote directly for them. They voted for their legislators, and the legislators voted for the senators. And no, I don't know how many states actually in the very beginning had ballot boxes that included ballots for the president in the first 2 or 3 elections. Did they? I mean, the electors could be elected by any means the state chose, and I believe a lot of them had their legislators elect the electors, who then elected the president. They did not want direct ballot elections of the president. And we still have the Electoral College, which technically is the, it's a terribly anti-democratic institution to the Democrats until they want the electors to overturn their votes for Trump in 2016. They went on television commercials and begged the electors to become faithless electors, which is ironic because that's what the founding fathers kind of had in mind. If you think this guy is going to be a disaster, the electors were your last defense to make sure that he didn't get in. If you think he was going to be a tyrant, if you think he was utterly disqualified to do the job, that was the elector's job, to keep him from getting in, no matter what the people wanted. Nobody talks about that anymore.
Right. Exactly. So as we're kind of winding down here, I want to make just a slight little turn, and I want to start first with something that I do. Ron knows about this. It's kind of my habit. I get a lot, as you might guess, I get a lot of either emails or phone calls, or run into somebody and they'll tell me how mean I am. And I usually agree. I probably am mean, and I'm short and fat as well. A lot of things I could be. And I'll give you my kid's phone number. They can tell you a lot of really bad stuff about me. But the question really is this: am I wrong? Because I want to talk about the issue. I don't really care what you think about me personally. So, in our current situation, as Christians that actually believe the Bible is inerrant and reliable, and that Jesus truly is God who was raised from the dead, and we live in a culture that is, as you pointed out, our Constitution is, how'd you put it, republic?
Constitutional Republic, yep.
Constitutional republic. Thank you. I'm old. I forget things pretty
Okay.
easily. How do we as believers live and try to respectfully, when possible, I think Peter talks about with gentleness and respect. How do we respectfully interact with the kinds of things that we see going on today?
I think it's important to continue to equip our families and build into our families. So I'd start with that. Like, who are the people you love the most? And so whether it be your children, your grandchildren, spending the time equipping them. Okay, have you heard this? Here's the latest attack that is in pop media. And so maybe you're watching a show with your kids or something, and there's an idea that attacks your faith. Okay, let's discuss that afterwards. Or you even criticize it like my family does during it. Like, hey guys, what do you think of that? Let's just pause the show there. Did you hear that claim? All right, go ahead. Kids, critique it. Let's see. And then you're teaching the kids how to not just take everything in, not to be passive, to actively engage their faith. Like, okay, how can I reason through this? How did I teach them correct patterns of thinking and analyzing arguments? Because this gift of God that we have being created in the Imago Dei, the image of God, he's given you this capacity to reason, and teaching your kids how to articulate the Christian worldview. So you're protecting them and building them up in the faith. And then it gets a lot easier because, okay, I've circled my wagons, making sure my kids are equipped. But then still, simultaneously, it's not like they're not seeing what the world is showing them, the evils of the world. Okay, how do we respond in a Christian way? There's responding in the flesh, which I know you really want to do. You just want to punch the guy's lights out. But then that's what you're letting your emotions dominate you. That's a mark of the left. Let's allow the image of God, seeing these other people as creating God's image, and try to break through to their reason, because reason is going to be the enemy of the devil. Because we could reason to the fact that Christianity is true. Come, let us reason together. We'll show you. We have arguments, and the winsomeness that a lot of our apologists present, I mean, that's going to win a lot of hearts too. You might not like the words, but look, his attitude. He's just so nice. He's so loving. What allows you to be that? Well, if it wasn't for Jesus, I would have probably knocked you out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. You know, when my kids were growing up, you have to understand, they grew up in a house with 2 apologists. And boy, we talked to the TV, we talked to the radio, we talked to the newspaper, we talked to everything all the time. And at one point there was a commercial, I think, for Three's Enough, that television show. And there was a situation where they were talking about somebody having an affair or whatever, and there was laughter in the background, and Joyce, kind of stopped and said, "Now," because my son's laughing, it was a laugh track. And she said, "Well, that's not really funny. How would you like it if your dad was doing that?" And his comment was, "Oh, Mom, you're always trying to get to the point of everything." That's true. And they learned because we all talked about it all the time.
Yes.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
So yes, train your children well. And it does mean talking about this stuff pretty openly, freely, often. Let them help to digest it on their own. My daughter, is kind of funny, she didn't like apologetics when she was growing up. She thought we were just arguing all the time. And then she went to high school. And in English class, she had to write a persuasive paper. So she came home. She said, "I want to write a paper on slavery, Nazi Germany, and abortion." And under the title, "Murder is socially acceptable." And so she talked to her teacher, who said, "Well, it's an interesting premise, but there's no evidence that abortion is murder, so you can't really write the paper." And so Jennifer came back unhappy. And I have to tell you, if Jennifer's unhappy, everybody's unhappy.
Okay.
And so she really wanted to write this paper now just about abortion. And how do I do this? What would you do, Dad? And I said, well, I'll do 2 things. First, I would write it and I wouldn't use the Bible. But let's talk to somebody else. I took her over and met with my friend James Hoffmeyer over at Wheaton College, and said, "What would you do?" And he sat down and he looked at her and he said, "Well, what I would do is this. Your teacher already said you can't write the paper. So if you write it, she's probably going to have her assistant grade it. Number 1. Number 2, I wouldn't use the Bible. They probably get 2 or 3 students a year doing that and just using Bible verses. You have to make a case that stands without appealing to the Bible. It could be a biblical case, but you can't appeal to the Bible." And so she did the work of research on what is actually going on in the womb. And she wrote a paper. She got an A. The teacher changed her view on abortion. It was kind of interesting.
Wow.
And then sent it into some periodical that she subscribes to, which then printed it.
Wow.
Right. So then the next thing was they were going to have a debate in class on abortion. And she was the pro-life proposition. The other student was pro-choice position. And Jennifer said, well, how would you do this? I said, well, you're going to be the starting one because you're going to positive. If it was me, I would learn all of their arguments in advance. I would refute their arguments as part of my presentation for my view and then make my position clear. She did exactly that. And the poor kid that followed her up to do the pro-choice position stood there and said, I don't have anything else to say. She came to like defense of the faith by that experience.
Hmm.
So
Well, that is a great story. Anyways, I looked up something, but I don't have to share it unless you guys have time.
well, I don't know. How long is it? We're 6 minutes over.
I just looked at how I wanted to remind myself of how many states chose their electors for the president by popular vote. You could vote for the president in 4 states, but you were really voting for a slate of electors. Only 4 states. New Hampshire and Massachusetts also had a popular vote, but the choice of electors was made by the state legislature. So the state legislature just used that information, and then they made the choice. Connecticut, Georgia, South Carolina selected by legislature alone. New Jersey selected by a governor and a council. The governor of New Jersey, this is 1789. New York failed to choose its electors in time due to a legislative deadlock. North Carolina and Rhode Island had not yet ratified the Constitution. So even though they didn't have a say in that first presidential election, once they were in, George Washington was their president. I don't think anybody complained. It was just a very different world in the beginning. And it wasn't until by 1832, I think it said, it took that long. That's about 50 years. That's over 50, about 50 years.
Okay.
Before, by that year, all states except South Carolina had adopted some form of popular vote. So there was this movement toward popular vote that the founding fathers did not,
do that, right?
They didn't require it. They let the states decide. And I think the general sentiment at the time was, the more you put up for popular vote, the more problems you're going to have.
Yeah.
But
I would like to. We have one comment that I just noticed, and I want to speak to it just before we leave here. It's pretty dishonest to assume those who disagree with you are doing so because of emotions. I don't. If we said that, I don't. I think he's correct.
Right.
I don't think we're assuming that. We are saying that many on one side of the issue are doing a popular narrative not based on actual truth. Some are doing it out of emotion. Others are doing it because they have bought into the narrative.
I think with most people, the emotions are a result of what they believe.
Yeah.
And if you have really passionate emotions, it's because you believe probably that there's been some great injustice. And now the question is your belief based on reality?
Right. So we're coming back to, is it reality? Can we talk about it? And that's important. Can we talk about it? Can we debate it? And even if you want to call me a name, that's fine. But let's stay with making an argument, making a defense, something we can actually deal with and test together.
I don't debate with Nazis, Don, so that's why I don't debate with you.
I know, and I don't blame you. and I am fat, but I'm also good looking. So would you walk us out of here, Ron?
Yes, let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polygamous. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben-Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Your Leg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Management Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happen.
I haven't seen it happen yet, so.
All right. And so to all out there, thank you for joining.